Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tale, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, and shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now let's get into today's tale. Lila Morgan had always carried a secret world inside her, a place made of colors, movement, and dreams too vast for the small town where she grew up. At 5 years old, armed with a battered box of second-hand colored pencils, she turned scraps of paper into portals to distant lands and faces she imagined meeting someday. In the cramped wooden house outside Dayton, Ohio, the walls of Cassidy's room bloomed with her art portraits of strangers at the bus stop, towering mountains. She'd only seen in books animals she could only dream of touching. But in a house where paychecks barely stretched to cover groceries, dreams were luxuries that couldn't survive. Her father, his hands permanently stained with machine grease, would shake his head every time he saw another. Of Cassidy's creations, dreams don't pay their rent, Cassidy'd mutter, while her mother, apron dusted with flour from long diner shifts, simply looked away, guilt plain on her face. Even when Cassidy's high school art teacher beamed with pride and begged them to consider art scholarships, their answer was always the same. She needs something safe. She needs something sure. So Lila tucked her pencils into drawers and taught herself to stop hoping. After school shifts at the local diner funded a business degree she didn't want. In classrooms filled with fluorescent light and droning lectures, she doodled frantically in the margins of her notebooks, desperate for a taste of the life she had abandoned. Every art gallery she passed stabbed her a little deeper, but Cassidy told herself safety was worth the pain. And when she finally landed a position at Quantum Nexus, a fast-growing tech company downtown, she tried to convince herself that she had one. Quantum Nexus, with its shining glass towers and immaculate lobbies, promised prestige, but Lila quickly learned it offered little else. Her days dissolved into a blur of spreadsheets, profit projections, and meetings that drained the color from her life. Still in the beginning, she clung stubbornly to her sketchbook, retreating to the rooftop garden during lunch breaks to sketch clouds. Birds and hurried coworkers, too, absorbed in their phones to notice the world around them. That's where she met EMTT Grant. EMTT was a janitor who had been polishing those same marble floors and emptying those same trash bins for more than 2 decades. His deep smile lines and thick calloused hands spoke of a life spent working without complaint. One afternoon, while Cassidy hunched over her pad trying to capture the angle of a dove mid-flight, she felt a shadow fall across her page. EMTT hands on his hips gave her a slow, knowing nod. "You've got a rare fire, kid," he said in a voice ruined by years but still warm. It was the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Over lunch breaks spent sharing sandwiches and stories, Lila learned about EMTT's late wife, Evaya, passionate painter who had created a tiny studio in the basement of their modest home. For her, painting wasn't a hobby. EMTT told her one afternoon, watching the horizon with faraway eyes, it was survival. Cassidy confessed her own buried dreams, the sketchbooks collecting dust under her bed, the constant ache to create something real. EMTT listened like no one else ever had, as if her dreams mattered in a world that only seemed to value her ability to crunch numbers. That was enough to keep Lila breathing. But the years rolled on and Quantum Nexus grew. Colder, harder, more brutal. Layoff after layoff swept through like a wildfire, and Lila survived them all. Not because she was thriving, but because she had learned how to make herself. Invisible promotions came with heavier chains. Her boss, Victor King, a man who wore cruelty like a tailored suit, singled her out whenever he needed to remind. The others who held the power, Cassidy, with her soft voice and stubborn glimmer of defiance, became his favorite punching bag. Meetings turned into public executions. A single misstep, a typo, Adelaide report, and Victor would gut her reputation in front of everyone. Gossip slithered through the hallways. Once friendly colleagues avoided her like she carried a disease. Cassidy told herself she was strong enough to survive. Even Jack saw the change, the shrinking shoulders, the tired eyes, the spirit fading inside her. "Don't let this place steal your fire," he warned her one day as she stared blankly at the skyline, a half-eaten sandwich forgotten in her lap. Lila only managed a weak smile. Survival was all she had left. Then came the stormy Tuesday in March. The air in the building was electric with fear. Whispered rumors of another round of strategic realignment spread like wildfire. Lila tried to keep her head down, but dread coiled tight in her gut as her name appeared in bold font on a mandatory meeting summons. She told herself she was safe, she was dependable. She never caused trouble, but when she entered the glass-walled conference room packed with nervous faces, she knew deep down she was wrong. Victor King sauntered in, flanked by 2 HR drones, with polished smiles and dead eyes. He spoke of optimizations and new visions in the oily tone of a man who savored every syllable of corporate slaughter. Then, like a lion, zeroing in on the wounded gazelle, he called her name Cassidy Morgan. Effective, immediately. Your position is terminated. The words punched, the air from her lungs. For a moment, the world tilted, and she clutched Thetible's edge to steady herself. Around her, coworkers who once shared jokes and happy hours pretended not to know her. Relief flickered in their averted eyes. Better her than me. Victor's voice was ablade as he ordered her to gather her things and leave under security escortas, if she were a criminal numb. Lila stumbled to her desk, where a cardboard box already waited, filled with her life, a few framed photos, a battered coffee mug, the succulent she had cared for since her first day. Buried beneath papers was her old sketchbook, untouched for months, maybe years, carrying the box like a shield. She walked the long hallway toward the elevators, humiliation, hot and heavy in her chest. Faces peered over cubicle walls, then ducked out of sight. No one spoke. No one dared. The only sound was the cruel click of her heels and the polished floor. That's when she saw him. EMTT stood beside his cleaning cart, his face unreadable but his eyes fierce with something that looked like defiance. Without a word, he pressed a small, heavy object into her shaking hand. A tarnished gold key. "It's time," he said quietly, anchoring her as the rest of her world crumbled into ash. "Time for what, EMTT?" Lila managed to choke out the key warm against her palm. EMTT slipped her a folded slip of paper with a handwritten address, Maplewood Avenue, No. 112 Evas. Studio, the place Lila hadn't ever heard about in wistful rooftop conversations under a different sky. "She would have wanted you to have it," Jack said. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Lila standing alone, clutching her past and maybe, just maybe, her future. That night, after hours of sobbing into her battered couch, Lila found herself driving through sheets of rain to a small, sagging house on Maplewood Avenue. The porch sagged and the fence leaned drunkenly, but there was something fiercely alive about the place. The key turned easily in the lock, and Lila stepped inside, heart hammering. The studio smelled of turpentine dust and something else, possibility. Tall windows let in beams of rain, muted light. Easels stood waiting like sentinels, shelves lined with forgotten brushes, blank canvases stacked against the walls, like unspoken promises. On a battered workable, a letter waited for her. She opened it, with trembling hands. Eva's looping handwriting greeting. "Greg and old friend Lila. This place is for the brave, for the ones who refuse to let the world shrink them. Life is too short to bury your fire. It's your time now." Cassidy slid to the floor, clutching the letter and the key, and for the first time in years she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't lost everything. Maybe the most important part of her had only been waiting for the right door to open, and this time she was ready. To walk through it, Cassidy stayed curled on the studio floor long after the rain stopped. The battered letter clutched in her hands, the words echoing louder than the storm ever had. "Life is too short to bury your fire." As dawn crept through the tall windows, illuminating the dust swirling in the air, Lila realized she had a choice. She could no longer outrun. She could either keep surviving the way she always had, small, silent, invisible, or she could finally step into the life that had been waiting for her. The first brushstroke was terrifying. Standing before a cracked canvas pulled from the pile in the pile, Sid's hands trembled so badly that the line wobbled across the surface. But with every line, every color, every breath, something inside her began to stitch itself back together. Days blurred into nights as she lost herself in the work painting until her arms aged and her mind emptied of everything Quantum Nexus had beaten into. Her EMTT visited, often bringing old supplies Eva had left behind: dried paints, faded sketch pads, brushes, worn toe-nubs, and each visit bolstered Cassid's resolve. "You're not rebuilding, kid," I said once, handing her a bundle of fresh canvas. You're finally building what they never let you have." She smiled, through tears the weight of gratitude, almost heavier than fear. Still, that old fear clung to her at night. She had no job, no steady paycheck, no backup plan if this failed. Some nights the darkness whispered Victor King's voice in her ear, mocking her, telling her she wasn't. Enough would never be enough. But each morning she picked up the brush again, because the alternative, returning to a life of quiet suffocation, was no longer an option. Small miracles started happening. First, a neighbor who passed by the open window glimpsed Cassidy's work and asked if she could paint a mural in her cafe. Then EMTT's niece commissioned a whimsical set of paintings for a children's center. Cassidy wasn't rich, not even close, but for the first time, she was surviving on her own terms. She set up a simple website, posted a few snapshots of her paintings, wrote a shaky little bio about rediscovering lost dreams. She didn't expect much, which made it all the more shocking when her inbox flooded within days, after a local lifestyle blogger stumbled onto her page and shared it. Orders trickled in, then flooded. Custom pieces, murals, book illustrations. Lila worked until her fingers cramped in thistles of her shoes, wore thin from pacing between easel and supply shelves. She wasn't just surviving. Now she was living, and yet the past wasn't quite done with her. One cool autumn afternoon, Lila was finishing a commission mural on a downtown cafe wall when a dark figure caught her eye. Across the street, half hidden by the crowd, stood Victor King, his tailored suit. His arrogant posture, they hadn't changed. But he was, no longer, the towering giant Lila remembered. Now he looked small, faded for a moment. Their eyes met across the busy street. Cassidy froze, the brush suspended midair. 100 memories crashed over her. The humiliation, the cold finality of her firing, the long walk of shame with cardboard boxes and downcast eyes. Victor smirked slightly, as if expecting her to look away, to shrink, to disappear. But this time, Lila didn't move. She held his gaze steady and unflinching, as if daring him to see the woman he had tried and failed to break. Then calmly, Lila dipped her brush into a jar of brilliant gold paint and turned back to her mural without giving him another thought. When she glanced up, again Victor was gone, swallowed by the crowd like a ghost retreating into the past. Later that night, back in the studio, Lila finished the portrait she had been working on for weeks. It was a painting of EMTT and Eva, not young, not flawless, but older, wiser. Weathered by time and yet radiant with the kind of love that outlived everything, she added. Tinny brush strokes of gold in their eyes, like the sunlight that had poured through the studio windows that first morning, when everything had seemed possible again. When EMTT came by to see it, he stood silently for a long time. His rough hands trembling slightly, how he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Cassidy smiled, feeling no fear, no doubt, only a fierce, soaring certainty she had never known before. "I just painted the life you deserve," she said. In the months that followed, Cassidy's work continued to flourish. But no commission, no gallery invitation, no check in the mail could match the feeling she carried inside her. Now she'd saved herself. She had walked through the last door that one everyone told her was impossible, and found not just her art waiting for her, but her freedom. And in that dusty little studio on Maplewood Avenue, Lila Morgan, the girl who had once been told dreams don't pay the rent, finally learned the truth.